Um, we just to get us everyone sort of back on topic. Um, for the past two meetings, we've been looking at subjective criteria in black belt promotions. Uh, the things we never tell our students, but the things we're looking for. And surprisingly, if you've followed the conversations over the past few times, um, regardless of martial art, sensei, Ryu, that there are some real commonalities to these quote unquote subjective criteria, which, and they have a lot of things in common. Um, I'd like to skip, there are three things left in subjective criteria, and I'm going to give you an option of doing this or doing something slightly different. Uh, one is one of the things that supposedly we look at is the development of the whole person, the candidate's judgment level, and the issue of ethics. And if you have this outline, wherever it is, you're in better shape. But if not, we can go on anyway. So my question is, we can either get into those last three subjective criteria, which really aren't too subjective, or we can get into the sensei's responsibility to select quote unquote appropriate students for a Unagi promotion. And uh, appropriate is the key subjective word. And there's someone else is logged in, but they're not here. Okay, let me shift in here, see who's here. Thomas, oops, where'd Tom go? I've admit Tom. And we have one other person who I just got a quick notification, but nothing else, and I really can't leave the meeting to resolve his connection problem. But anyway, good morning, Tom.
Morning, George. Sorry I'm late. I was logging in with the wrong password. Sorry.
That's okay. We'll let you work out without mats today. Anyway, have you practice Tomonagi? Anyway, so that's the question is, the question is, do we want to finish up the three subjective criteria of development of the whole person, candidate's judgment level, and the issue of ethics, or do we want to switch to the next subtopic, which is the sensei's responsibility to select appropriate students for Unacha promotion, which we then go to the values of the promoting sensei. So which any we have any preference as to which way we'd like to go today, or?
I'm still writing.
Dave is the most prodigious note taker and most accurate one I think I've ever seen from
Well,
some
thank
recent
you. I just
Yeah.
write it as I hear it. Hopefully it's accurate.
Anyway, so
if I understand correctly, it's a judgment level and the ethics of the person that is attempting to achieve black belt versus the values of the promoting sensei.
well, okay. I'm on. Are you looking at the outline, Dave?
No, I don't have the outline in front of me.
Oh my God.
Yeah, shame on me.
And you didn't jot down notes from memory?
I should print that out, shouldn't I? Yeah.
Anyway, okay, no, there are three subjective criteria that we haven't touched on yet. And supposedly we're looking for in the student. One of them is the development of the whole person. Next one is their judgment level, the candidate's judgment level. And the third one is the issue of ethics, which goes back to the martial arts philosophy of the instructor, which is the instructor's goal to develop an effective fighter or um, a martial artist. And both of those terms I'm sure, are subject to various interpretations. So, or we can switch to what is the sensei's responsibility in selecting someone, deciding that someone's good enough to be or qualified enough to be a black belt. Which direction do you want to go?
Well, that first one I've covered in previous meetings as far as effective fighter versus martial artist. I hesitate to go there again myself because I've made my thoughts on that real clear.
Okay.
But I can do that again if people want to listen to my pontificating.
Well, let's just try and finish up the subjective criteria as far as looking at students, and we'll go on to a sensei's responsibility, and
Okay.
then nobody will feel left out. And Thomas, before I forget, I forwarded an email to you this morning from PayPal or GoFundMe or something like that.
Yeah,
And I'm sure you and I can talk and we can straighten this thing out so that the money goes directly where it's supposed to go. But anyway,
definitely. Yeah.
yeah, because we're talking about actually about $1,700 because they found a check that wasn't cashed for
Oh,
$1,400 and some odd dollars. But
that's
anyway,
that's good news if it's going to the AJA, I guess.
yeah. Okay, but anyway, okay. We're looking at the development of the whole person. If a first Brown comes to me and say, what are you looking at? I'd say, well, I'm looking at you as a whole person. Anyone want to define what looking at you as a whole person means?
I mean, as someone who has a daughter who's very serious about sports in high school, she's going to play sports in college, field hockey specifically. When I see coaches assessing players who are going to make the team or not make the team, a fundamental concern, the overriding concern is, do they have the technical abilities and willpower to be a good member of the team and to help the team win? Other aspects of their personality are not critical, and I think this putting the sheer physical ability above every other consideration becomes even more pronounced as you move up in skill level. And we've on these calls before, we've discussed how top martial artists or MMA people can often have horrible personalities and be semi-criminal or actual criminal personalities and yet still excel in physical parts of MMA. And I see a real distinction there, as the assessment of one's ethical qualities and one's personality should be a significant consideration as you're moving through ranks. And that's one of the main things that distinguishes traditional martial arts from sports and is irreplaceable as a quality. I've never heard of these qualities being discussed when it's a decision about putting someone on the first team or the second team, whether that person has ethical qualities that are worth emulating or whether they're a criminal or whether they're just horrible to their teammates. And that's a critical thing. That's a critical opportunity we have as martial artists and teachers to inculcate those qualities. So how to express them to students, I don't know. It's in sports, the bar is very low. So unless you're a criminal or you're going to be kicked out of school because academically you're terrible or you assault your teammates, they don't. A coach probably wouldn't care as long as you can score goals or do whatever on the team. All these more ethical considerations are secondary. I think they should be really primary in martial arts. And as representatives of say Budoshin, with the set of qualities you've come up with, George, they're pretty straightforward. And if a student dramatically falls short of any of those qualities, you don't probably want them representing your martial arts. And I would agree with that and think it's a quality that all martial arts should try to inculcate and pass on.
Okay, so I think what's happening here, or what you're saying indirectly, it leads directly into the candidate's judgment level, which is they've made some poor decisions in the past, maybe, or maybe they've made good judgment decisions. They've developed themselves in a positive way. I think we've already covered, they if we're talking about a team, they're helping their teammates improve. They're not solely self-centered. Their emphasis is on the success of the team, not their personal aggrandizement, for lack of a better phrase. Although if the team does do better, they will too, or they should. So we're looking also at the candidates' judgment level. Are they capable of making relatively mature decisions? And I've seen, I think the youngest age I've promoted a person to black belt is 16, but before I do that, usually the entire class respects this person, and they respect their level of knowledge, and this person is very helpful, helps others learn. They're in essence becoming a good instructor. And I've seen some adults in their 20s and early 30s who may be technically very proficient, but nobody in the class really wants to work out with them. For, either because of their ego or because they sort of follow the safety rules, but not really. So the candidate's judgment level does play into this, and all of this stuff is the problem is that all of this stuff, and we have like 12 criteria here, all of these things are interdependent. You can't just take one of them on their own and say, this is what I'm looking at. And
I would throw in that there's also an opportunity to have traditional martial arts help reform people, especially younger people, where they may be tremendously talented from a physical, technical standpoint, but have some nasty personal qualities. They may be very arrogant, and it's up to a given martial art to temper that and say, well, in your case, in the case of Budoshin, humility is a quality that we value, and that's essential for us. And right now you have all this talent, student X, but you're not showing much humility, and that's critical for us to represent our school. Therefore, I'd like to see you start developing this quality of humility and helping others in the dojo and sharing your ability. Otherwise, you're going to be limited in your advancement through the ranks.
okay. So how would you, if I say, well, and I'm not trying to be a devil's advocate here, or PETA for those. What if I say to you, well, what specifically do you want me to do? How can I show you that I'm more humble?
That in most cases, it's telling people what not to do, because arrogance is usually manifested by doing things that are aggressively self-centered or disregarding the feelings of other people. So if once someone in an instance where a student transgresses that, you'll say, listen, that's not showing humility. To humiliate another another student on the mat by showing your abilities without trying to help the other student, and maybe berating other students or disregarding their talents or belittling their talents. Those are not manifestations of humility. So if you don't stop doing that, you're going to be limited. You're not a good representative of our school. So it's more evidence of someone having gone too far in many cases.
Okay, anyone else have any other thoughts on this, or?
Well, I'm listening. I'm thinking of the term healthy ego and unhealthy ego. And certainly one of the main things we're doing in the face of what Tom's bringing up here, and thank you for clarifying some things, Tom. I think you did a great job starting our meeting today. Is we're responsible for developing character. We're teaching fighting, we're teaching self-defense, but the goal of martial arts study is to develop character. And what happens is, like the kind of individual you're talking about, is that we want to temper or remove the unhealthy ego from disagreements. I vividly remember being at a fourth degree black belt training. Not fourth degree, it was a fourth degree black belt promotion ceremony, and there were a couple of first degree black belts who were 18 years old, unrelated, but they had come through the learning process together, and they both had a version of the same story, and that is that before they started to study martial arts, they got in a lot of fights at school. What they learned along the way in studying self-defense is that it's not a really great way to settle disagreements, and they found that as the more training they got, the less likely they were to be fighting. And that's no mistake. That's something that their character development involved removing ego from the equation, unhealthy ego from the equation, and having them just walk away. I got nothing to prove here. And rather than inciting or escalating a disagreement, they just agree to disagree and walk away. I thought it's outstanding that these young men now are less prone to having that issue throughout their lives, in their working life, and their family life, and so
Yeah,
forth.
you have to watch it. I can't drag it for some reason.
Okay, all right.
I love my microphones.
Caitlin, we don't have any video for you. We have audio, but or had a okay. But so Dave, what you're saying is we're looking, one of the things we're really looking at in terms of a black belt candidate is that maybe some changes in their character, the way they behave, the way they treat others, the way they respect themselves,
Just listen to it.
that would make them more within the what we look at traditionally in terms of what is a martial artist.
Correct. The whole notion here is, we make the term self-esteem comes up a lot. Self-esteem is how others see us. And that might be good for us to develop our self-esteem so that others see us in a better light. But it's other-oriented. What I'm talking about is something more important and much more significant than high self-esteem, and that is self-perception. How do we see ourselves? How do we see ourselves accurately? And that goes to another area of self-actualization.
See if
If you haven't
someone.
looked up self-actualization, Google it and have some fun. And while you're at it, go into the Stoics and Stoicism, because that's essentially what we're talking about here with the development of character when we teach martial arts.
Okay.
Self-perception.
I would throw in really quickly, agree 1,000% with everything you just said, Dave Clark. But after having trained in martial arts for a lot less time than most people on this call, 20 years, it's exceptional. It's exceptionally rare to hear anybody, any sensei, discuss things like character development, to do much beyond the technical aspects of a given art, and it's strikingly rare and disappointing that it doesn't come up more often. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, let's switch over, because if we're talking about, we're looking, in some students, we're looking for a change in their behavior or character or attitude or level of humility or integrity, or the three criteria that I have: integrity, humility, and
Respect.
what?
Respect.
What was the third one? I'm sorry.
Respect.
Respect.
That's the most significant.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I look at a person, I look at, my first thing is, do they respect themselves? And all these three characteristics all play into one another. They can't be taken in an isolated manner. If they respect themselves, they are humble. They are, they're not out there to prove how good they are. Yeah, on the other hand, it's okay to say, yeah, I can do this technique quite well. But I think it's essential at some point you realize, I'm going to be learning this technique for the rest of my life. So I don't, I'm not perfect yet. And
And the
other people may say you're doing the technique perfectly, and you don't have to say, no, I'm not, because then you have to tell them what you're doing wrong. But there's a certain amount of self-respect and humility that we should be looking for, in addition to just physical performance. Because we're looking, as Thomas said and as David said, we should be looking at the whole person.
I would add that a major part of the allure of training in traditional martial arts, for me initially, and for a lot of younger people, is that there is an explicit connection in the case of jujitsu to say the history of the samurai, Bushido, the moral code that went along at various points with samurai living the value system that they had. Not that it's entirely replicable in contemporary life, but there is a set of values that goes along with that, in the same way that they go along with, say, Western chivalry. Or there's a Korean version called the Hwarangdo code, which is based on this 5th century group of Korean knights, and they're all out there, these moral codes or behavioral suggestions, and it's a critical part of the study to me. It's a portal, doing jujitsu, to feudal history of Japan and getting into all that. And I'm just very, very, very surprised that that so few dojos deal with that explicitly. They see what we do week in and week out as mostly technical stuff, where if you get attacked doing this, you do that. And if you go knowing that for the rest of my life, I'm very unlikely to be attacked on the street because I know how to avoid getting into trouble. So if you're doing these physical activities that have very little likelihood of ever being used, it's great to know them on a technical level. But what else is there to the study? To me, there must be something else. There must be some other code or set of principles or history that makes it interesting to do. Sorry, I'm going on at great length, but this is it's a frustrating point that for me in my studies.
Like I said, I think, like I said, you have to consider our responsibility as a sensei is to have a black belt who represents the art represents us. It doesn't mean they're going to be a perfect image of us. One of me is bad enough. Uh, uh, um, but and that's a grave responsibility for us as sensei. Because if we make a mistake, it reflects directly upon us. And, you know, I've lost some of my technically very good black belts, not because of their technical skills, but what's going on between their ears. And that's, you know, I mean, I consider that a personal loss because they're at times they've had great attitudes, or, you know, or they just got into or put themselves into situations where their standards were no longer, for lack of a better phrase, their standards were no longer what I felt were proper standards for being a member of my dojo. And I would ultimately, and this is a key in every situation, I ultimately left it up to that person as to whether they could function in my dojo or could not. So that it was their decision, not my decision. And what I would usually do, I think in every case, it ended up in some, you know, written correspondence, at least from me, saying, you know, if you're going to be in this dojo, this is what, you know, this is what the standards are. And, you know, if you're practicing another martial art, hunky-dory, no problem. It will make you a better and perhaps more complete martial artist, but it stops at the door. And that's a hard thing for some sensei to say. And it's a hard thing for some black belts to do once, you know, or any student once they believe they quote unquote know a martial art, and then they want to go off and learn another martial art, which, you know, you can't prevent people from doing. And I even did. I mean, you know, I while I was studying under Seki, I also did some studying under Harold Brocious. But they both knew
Well, then you can send an email, I think, and say, hey, do you got my, if you wanted to contact George, but I don't know if that'll interrupt him or not.
Did someone?
Background noise.
Yeah. I think it might be coming from the letter K on our screen.
Caitlin? Yeah. You know, it's both of my sensei knew what I was doing. And both of them, their standard was it stops at the door. And I respected that. And the problem occurs once you have a black belt who starts learning something else and maybe starts wanting to proselytize it in your dojo, etc. It shows maybe a lack of good judgment on their part or respect. And, you know, you either allow it or you don't.
Sensei, on this topic, I also take the opposite viewpoint, and that is that no one teacher has all the answers. I encourage my
Right.
students, both music students and self-defense students, to study with another teacher or another sensei to gain a perspective, which is why many of us here have earned more than one black belt. We're more serious about learning, and that perspective gained from studying a different martial art that will support some of the weaknesses inherent in our initial study of martial arts makes us better, more well-rounded in our ability to defend ourselves, but also in our ability to teach, our ability to use the information. So I encourage all of my students at some point in their life just to go ahead and study with in another venue for that valuable gain of perception.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, both Hal and Jack Secchi, they were both teaching jujitsu. They were teaching different styles. And I picked up some odds and ends from Hal that I felt filled in maybe some blank spots in what Secchi was teaching. And I think that's what we do. At some point, we realize what we have learned thus far maybe has some blank spots in it. And so, as you're saying, Dave, we're trying to fill in those blank spots.
For 5 minutes before I'm driving.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of our human nature in anything we do. But if I just evaluated a person the other day on a green belt video for a green belt, and when they blocked because of their karate training, because when they blocked, they were training basic blocks for green belt, they stepped back, and I said that may be okay now, but the way I was taught was when you block, you step in, because that allows you to initiate your distraction technique from a closer position and then go into a throw or whatever else you were going to do. You're putting yourself in position for your defense. So he's now working out that problem. Okay. Again, it's his previous training, but like you said, Dave, there are different ways to do things.
Right. I tell you, it's interesting. I'm laughing because I'm thinking of something that really messed me up early on. My first black belts in karate, and we had the immovable object up against the unstoppable force, which meant that when we created the immovable object, our rear leg would go back and straighten so that we could deal with that unstoppable force coming toward us. Well, that's all well and good, but you don't want your rear leg straight when somebody's going to osotogari you, because they're going to blow out your knee. It only happened to me twice before I figured it out. One time I was on crutches. It's like, Dave, you better bend that back leg. This isn't karate anymore.
It's I think one of the things that's nice about maybe learning a different version of the art or another art is that you pick up issues that you say, okay, I need to make a decision on this. Because what I've learned, like there are some techniques I teach differently than Secchi taught, end up with the same result, but I teach them a little differently. And sometimes it's based on my own experience, or sometimes the student has actually come up with a better way of teaching a technique, or I've seen another sensei teach it a different way. We all learn. If we keep an open mind, it's amazing how much we can learn. And I know we're getting sidetracked here. It's we all think that what we're teaching comes from all hot, from way up high somewhere, but sometimes a lower ranked student will say, "But sensei,"
Yep.
and they'll actually come up with a very valid point, and they're correct. And that then comes down to, believe it or not, as Thomas and Dave said a few minutes ago, humility, being able to admit, okay, maybe this is a better way. And, if like I've said once before, if a student comes up with a different way of teaching a technique or doing a technique, I'll usually say, teach it to the class. I don't care what rank they are. I'll say, teach it to the class. And if the class can do it, it has validity. And that then reinforces their sense of self-esteem. Okay. I've saved face, and hopefully it garners more respect for the student who challenged me, And it also lets other students know that someday maybe they'll come up with a different and maybe better way of doing things. And some sensei can accept that, and some sensei find that very threatening. And this is particularly so if you're in a system where this is how the technique was taught 6,000 years ago. I'm exaggerating. And this is how we're going to teach it. And, you know, I will have new students who, when they come in, I say, okay, you're going to do a hit to a person from the front. And they'll come in with a roundhouse. I say, no, I want a straight punch. And the student will occasionally ask why. And I'll say, if you can block a straight punch, you can block a roundhouse. The straight punch comes in a lot faster than a roundhouse. So, you know, and so sometimes you have to, I lost the point of my message, what I was saying now. You know, you have to allow for some flexibility in the dojo in terms of what's being taught and how it's being taught and how they're learning, because different people learn different ways. And sometimes you have to learn through experience that, oh, that block isn't going to work.
Yeah, there may be historical reasons that are interesting
Right.
for some techniques, explanations for why. And I'm thinking of a Korean art that I've studied where if you're in a monastery doing something, it may be the architecture of the monastery that would influence why you're doing something in a certain way, and a position of an attacker might be in a very unusual position, but the art develops so that while that's very interesting historically, you may modify it based on not being in a monastery or not being in a certain context. With jujitsu, because it evolved as something to do with an armed and armored assailant, it does have contemporary relevance because of that very quality of not emphasizing punching and kicking as much as the more linear martial arts. So you get that. Well, there's the interesting history of samurai in combat, but there's also the very real benefit of de-emphasizing punching and kicking because of their lack of effectiveness in some contexts. So it is relevant to today, and the history is relevant too. But there's a reason for it. There's some explanation for why it's still relevant today.
Right. I think I don't know how many of you have dealt with training law enforcement personnel. But if you really want to get a sensitivity towards, quote unquote, as Trauma said, the armor that's being worn.
Yeah.
If they're wearing a full bulletproof vest, if I forget what you call the belt that has all their goodies on it. There's a particular term for, you know, it's a common, it's not a slang term, but there's a term for the name of the belt that holds your sidearm and your cuffs and your pepper spray and
Utility?
what?
A utility belt? Is that what it is?
It can be called a utility belt, but there's another name. It's named after, I think, some police officer that invented it 500 years ago. But no, but you put all this gear on, and it's amazing how a lot of the techniques we teach become more challenging because of what they're required to wear. And that's, you know, that's something you have to be aware of. If you're working with law enforcement, you can work, for example, you can have, okay, we're going to meet today in sweats. Tomorrow I want you in sweats and wearing a utility belt, your bulletproof vest, all the gear that's attached to it, cameras, microphones, the kitchen sink, and see how easy it is to do the techniques that you do with all that gear on you. Okay. So anyway, but you know, it comes down to what you, if you're in a dojo, you know, what do you want to allow in a dojo, and what variations do you want to allow in terms of instruction? John, did you want to say something? Your microphone's not on. John, you don't have any audio.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to apologize. I started this with George saying, "Hey, I'm actually at a charity event, and my wife is just signaling me, and she's the real boss, that I have to go. They're doing a 5K fund walk fundraiser, so I'm gonna have to. It's nice meeting you all, gentlemen, but I'm gonna have to leave the call. So, thank you."
Okay, take care. Okay. Okay, right now where Tom is disconnected somehow, and Caitlin is still not online. Caitlin has sound but no camera, video.
I salute John for knowing who's in charge.
Mhm.
It does happen.
There's a reason why my wife's name is still on the computer here.
Sometimes, how do you say, compromise is the key. Anyway, okay. So do we, in this whole process of selecting a person, you know, you're a black belt, you're trying to decide, is this person qualified to become a black belt? And yeah, they do all the technical stuff. What if I had to say, what is your definition of an appropriate of a student? What are the, what makes, I can't even phrase the question correctly, because it says on here, goes select appropriate students for Yudansha promotion. What is an appropriate student beyond, let's say, beyond the technical capabilities? We can get past it, or can we?
Well, I appreciate this discussion. I mean, this helps me you know, categorize these points a little bit better, but the way I've addressed this over the years is you compare having a black belt to having a gun. If you own a gun, what are the responsibilities that you should have in owning a weapon like that, where you could potentially kill somebody with it, as you can the techniques that we practice. Okay. And I kind of think along those lines.
That's I hate to say pretty cut and dry, but it's pretty cut and dry, and it's a very valid comparison. Okay. So you're saying that in essence, is this student willing to accept this responsibility, and can they make proper decisions in the use of what you've taught them?
Have they developed, or do they have the personality type that allows them to be responsible with a weapon like that?
Okay. Okay. Anybody else want to throw up an analogy for what makes an appropriate student, an appropriate candidate for black belt? Dave, you know audio.
I'm sorry, sir.
I think the three criteria that you have that people start out in white belt is just respect, humility, and integrity. When someone exemplifies any one, they're really exemplifying the other two. But that's solid, a foundation, along with technical skills. End of story, kind of straight up.
Okay. Darren or Thomas, you want to throw anything else
I think you've already hit the nail on the head there, Sensei.
I'll add some things, Sensei. I think it's a
it's a combination of a few things that all roll up into the things that I think kind of branch out into the rest of everything else. I mean, obviously, you need to consider character, commitment, contribution, dedication, understanding, and then that all comes into your physical ability, regardless if you have physical limitations or not, and how they are committed into doing their best wholeheartedly to learn the art or system, their understanding of it, what they're being taught, what they're doing with it, the purpose of it, mental capacity and mental development, as well as spiritual.
Okay. They're all very valid points. Okay.
I would throw in, I look at it in two ways. There's the avoidance of having really, really bad qualities, of avoiding things like criminality or terrible behavior toward other people. You would want to make sure that somebody isn't showing a lot of really bad ethical qualities. So that's the preventative measure, but that's at higher levels. I think that would be assumed that somebody's not going to misuse those abilities, technical abilities. And I think the gun analogy is an excellent one on a preventative scale. You've got somebody who may be younger, 16 or 18 years old, and yet you've taught that person how to strangle or choke someone to death or break limbs. And why would you think of teaching that to somebody who's not showing responsibility for that? And if there's evidence that that person is going to misuse that, then have the discussion early on and say, you are limiting yourself by showing these qualities, and I'm not going to promote you eventually to black belt because you're not showing that you have the level of maturity or responsibility to handle them. I think it's a really excellent analogy, because the skills are amoral. The ability to do a correct throw or to strangle or choke somebody to death doesn't have a moral dimension to it. It's a technical act, and it can be used for good or bad. And to show that you're predisposed to using it for bad reasons, or you might use it for that reason, is an excellent ground for not promoting somebody. But those are the negative things. On the more positive side, I would once you're avoiding the negative qualities, you want to look for a lot of what Darren covered, this desire to help other people, the desire to teach, desire to spread the benefits of jujitsu or whatever martial arts you're doing. Those are all the positive side. I don't know that they're absolutely critical. I don't know that somebody must show a desire to teach or to open his own dojo. I don't know. That's more of a subjective call. But I think there should be more than just preventing the negative. I think there should be more than anything else. There should be transparent and clear standards. And in the AJA right now, sub dojos do have very clear standards about what it takes to be promoted to Shodan. Others, the one I got my own Shodan in was very, very up in the air, very subjective. There was no clear description of what the criteria were to reach Shodan. And I think that does a disservice to the students and causes frustration. There's no reason that these qualifications shouldn't be explicit. I know the old-fashioned way is the more, maybe Seki. I know in your promotions, George, that you've recounted through Seki, it's sort of Seki, having known you for so many years, feels that you're this way, and he's observed you, and that's good. I also see room for making things explicit and writing down the qualifications.
I think,
That would also be frustrating to a student to not have clear criteria. Yeah. Darren, your list is amazing. I really like it, and I'm going to need to watch the video and take notes and go through what you shared several times, because I can't write as fast as you went through that great list.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Sensei, I interrupted you.
No problem. For those of you who've gone through my black belt exams and the questions that I asked Uh, the reason I selected those questions and phrased them as I do is how a person responds to an extent tells me how they're thinking. And I'm not necessarily looking for someone who agrees with me. I'm looking to see how they think, which is will usually ask them to explain their answer. Giving an answer to a question is a lot easier than explaining why you gave your reasons for giving that answer. And that gives me some insight into how the student thinks. And I think we've done a pretty good job here in dealing with the subjective criteria, which if you go through the past two Zoom meetings and this one, there's some pretty common agreement in terms of what we're looking at, which is surprisingly good. We're just looking at the same piece of paper a little differently, for lack of a better phrase. So my question at this point is, when we look at a person, we have our subjective criteria, whatever it may be, and do we whatever our criteria is within our own dojo, within our own mind, and we all have certain standards, okay? Do we apply all of those standards equally to all candidates for Shodan?
Yes and no.
Go for it, Darren.
I mean, you have to. There's no any two individuals that will ever be the same. So the criteria changes for each specific individual. Some may be more dominant in a physical capacity, some may be more dominant in a mental capacity or spiritual capacity. All may contribute the same. I mean, that dynamic changes in every evaluation that you do for every individual.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
That leads to the notion that no, all black belts are not created equal.
Right.
That's do I have audio here or?
Jim? Yes.
Oh, okay. I am in agreement with Darren, Sensei Darren on this. An example would be in our class, we have a gentleman who became ill some years ago with a form of cancer. And it was the treatment of the cancer that really traumatized his ability to have muscular coordination. So if you think for a moment, doing a block, and I'm just using it from a karate standpoint, but it could be in ju-jitsu or anything, a block and grabbing, and then turn the wrist, palm up, so you can pull for a zuki. You have a tremendous struggle with that, a tremendous struggle. And he had made it to brown belt with another teacher, and he came to me one day and said, I'd like to train with you, and you're a real gentleman. You cannot help but like Jeff. But the things that you and I would take for granted and do very easily is to either a jujitsu technique or karate or kempo, whatever. He would have tremendous struggles with this. He's been with us about a year now, and he's making steady improvement. So he said to me, I had a goal in life to obtain a Shodan or black belt. He says, and that's something I want to do. And after the first session, I said to myself, how am I going to do this? And it occurred to me that there's some connection between my thinking and what Sensei Darren said. Everybody's different, some spiritual, some emotional, some physical, whatever, he could still be a black belt, because if he reaches his potential, and has a basic criteria that he's achieved, certainly he could be a black belt. And I don't know if I'm getting my point across at all, but I would ask for your help on this. But let's put it that way there.
Okay, I'll throw my 2 cents in. I learned a lot. There are, and I've had students in this situation for whatever reason, whether it be illness or prior injury, or they may not be able to do certain techniques. And it's a given, and I could work with them until hell freezes over and they wouldn't be able to do it. Okay. And I call that spinning your wheels and getting nowhere. One of the nice things about Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, depending upon your background as a black belt, is, are there alternate techniques you can have them do? Okay. And sometimes the ability to find alternate techniques that may show the same skill level. It may be a different technique, but if the complexity of the techniques is such that they can do it, then maybe that technique should replace whatever it says on any black belt exam or what have you, or brown belt. Everybody doesn't come out of the same cereal box. Okay. We're not all a bunch of Cheerios. Okay. And I think Darren's criteria are good criteria. I mean, I will try, if I have if I have a student who cannot do something for a legitimate reason, I will try and find an alternate technique they can do in place of it. The criteria on belt exams are not etched in titanium. Okay.
Understood.
And we as sensei ultimately are saying this student is good enough to be that rank based upon my evaluation and my professional judgment. Okay. And I think as long as you can come up with an alternate techniques or alternate things they can do that will show that they are at that particular belt level, okay, you're okay. Because someone can say, well, they couldn't do a uki-otoshi. How can you promote them to Nikyu? You can say, I had them do yada, yada, yada instead. And if they say, well, why did you allow that? You can explain it to them. You know, that's one of the niceties of Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. We don't teach everything we know.
So Sensei, if here's a non-debatable scenario, in my opinion, I think everyone would agree, not only in this call, but in every martial arts worldwide at any time. If I'm a 5th degree black belt now and physically can do everything that is required of me, what someone thinks is required in any system, and tomorrow either I get into a car accident and then it limits my physical ability, or let's say it like this, the undefeated Father Time catches up to me and that limits my physical ability. Does that mean that I forever stay a 5th degree black belt?
No.
And I think in that regard, the answer is no. Everyone says we're going to evaluate you in a different perspective, an individual perspective of what you've put into the art, put into the system, how you've grown with it, not only performing your physical abilities to your own ability that you can, but your mental development, your spiritual development, your character, all of those other things come into play. And so Father Time is undefeated, as I said. No one can deny that. Eventually, everyone's physical ability will be limited. And I don't know anyone here that would say, we're not going to promote someone because now you can't perform like you used to or at a certain time.
I agree
Yeah.
with you.
I agree there, Sensei Darren. You put it in a very, very well context. Thank you.
Yeah.
You too, Sensei George.
Yeah. I think I mean, at least with Budoshin Jujitsu after fifth dan, it really does get to be, they're honorary belts
Mhm.
based upon essentially what hopefully you're doing to grow in the art and what you're giving, hopefully you're giving back, and you may not be able to do much physically, but if you're an excellent writer, you may be able to put some terrific information and concepts down in writing that other people can think about. Okay. And you can't say that's not growth. Okay. So I think as I said in here somewhere, we're looking at development of the whole person. And if you've done your job as a sensei, okay, and you have a student who's at whatever belt level, and you believe they should be promoted to the next rank, that's your right to do so. It's also your responsibility if they screw up. But if you use good judgment, you're not likely to make a mistake. It can happen, but it's not likely. And so I think that's, it like I said, I've had students who've had physical limitations. One of my black belts from years ago, who was not handicapped, actually came up with a whole series of techniques for people who were in wheelchairs using walkers. And you could put him in a wheelchair and you wouldn't want to get near him. Those are vicious little tools.
Sure.
You can break a lot of ankles with a walker just by moving it forward and then you stepping forward to get back into the walker. I mean,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
would agree totally with everything you and Darren primarily have pointed out. And if someone turned up at your dojo and with missing a limb, who's a veteran, say, who's has either missing a limb or is missing or has limited mobility, I can't imagine a sensei, a jujitsu sensei, who would turn that person down, because that person is going to have to learn other ways of doing throws or adapting to that limitation. And also, if you look at the origins of jujitsu, a samurai who was armed on a battlefield would hardly throw away his weapons if he were confronted with someone else. It's only when he lost his weapons that he resorted to jujitsu. So he was inherently in a limited or disadvantageous physical position compared with his attacker, who might be wielding a sword or a spear. So jujitsu developed historically based on that sense of weakness or limitation. So how are we going to limit other people who come to jujitsu and want to train in it? I worked with people who weigh 300 pounds. A very high ranking sensei who promoted me he's not a 300-pound guy, at least of normal height. He's not 7 feet tall to compensate for being very heavy, but he's not doing, there are certain break falls, certain basic things I'm sure he couldn't do. But that's at his level, he had a lot of other things to offer. So, and we've all seen 90-pound women who are able to do things to compensate for their lack of relative strength. These are the key qualities that distinguish jujitsu from other martial arts. That flexibility. So, absolutely, totally agree with you guys.
Yeah, I mean, even when I taught junior high, I'd have a kid come in with his arm in a cast or leg in a brace, and they'd ask, is there any way I can get on the mat? I'd say, yes, we'll work around whatever your limitation is. Because at least in California, if a person swings at you and you block them with an arm in a cast, you can theoretically end up on the short end of the stick legal wise, because the cast is considered a weapon. Eh, uh, but students need to learn that they can still defend them, as Tom, you're saying, and Darren is saying, and everyone else is saying. You need to learn to defend yourself, even if you are physically limited. Being physically limited is not necessarily an excuse to say, I can't do anything. Okay. And
I'd say there's another area we can go here. Just it's a relevant aside. As sensei, if we want to continue as we age and want to go into our 60s, 70s, and 80s and still be physically capable, we can up the odds. I've got a chart that points this out. I don't have it with me right now, but if people are interested, I'll be glad to send it to you. That points out, based on research, the years 60, 70, and 80s where people have maintained a level of physical well-being that's equivalent to their 30s and 40s by staying on Mediterranean diet and having a regular exercise program that involves both aerobics and strength, and also stretching. And so one of the beautiful things when we work with our students is we are getting at least a modest amount of movement. I wouldn't call it exercise, though, and it's not a replacement for your own personal regular exercise program. It's not just to improve longevity. That might be an aside, but I could care less about longevity. It's about improving your effectiveness as your physical abilities maintained far superior to what they would be if you were sedentary on a regular basis. I throw that out there because how long we can remain physically adept is in large part our own decision, barring injury, illness that is beyond our control.
okay. 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 I think we got sidetracked here a bit, which is okay, into students with disabilities. I mean, as I said before, I many years ago, I had a student who was a deaf mute. But I mean, he watched like a hawk, and his key eyes were totally ungodly. He had no idea what he was saying, but he scared the wits out of anyone he was throwing or whenever he was thrown. But I think we can't really exclude a person from studying simply because of a physical or mental or emotional limitation, unless that limitation poses a serious threat to the safety of that student and other students in the class. And that's another subjective value. But I mean, I've had one or two occasions with the city where they said, you know, can you take so and so into your class? We will provide them with an aid. And I said the student is not the problem. I said the aid is the problem, because the aid has to learn the techniques as well. The aid has to follow the safety rules. The aid, by being an additional person standing out there on the mat, is a safety hazard. I said that, but the problem is the aide, because the aide has to learn all the skills so that they can help the student who's limited. And that's the way I put it. So, you know, I wish there was a simpler answer because I would have loved to say yes, but
It
yeah.
also speaks to the sense of responsibility that we
Yeah.
were touching on earlier, and emotional maturity. Where are you going to teach somebody to kill who may not have the mental ability to control what he's doing physically? In the same sense, are you going to hand a gun to somebody who may not use it responsibly? It's that's a definite takeaway analogy.
Right. See, Ned, your original comment is still floating. Uh,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you. There's a perspective. I don't want to take up too much time, but there's a perspective that or a situation that we came across years ago that I just want to mention is that we had a new student come in who he came in, started jujitsu at the age of 50 or early 50s, ex-military, second-degree black belt, and came into the dojo day one with all these attributes that we're talking about. He was very respectful, very nice guy, could work well with others. But by the time he got tested for black belt, the guy was dangerous. He wasn't disrespectful or anything like that, but he could not control himself in a very safe way. He tends to start a technique, tries to do it easily, but would accelerate very quickly into it to the point that we could not promote him to black belt because he didn't have the control that we required. And I just wanted to put that out there as an example that of somebody that meets all the requirements of a black belt, the personality requirements as well, but was way too dangerous for us to promote.
How did you handle that? Did you talk it through with this person, or was he receptive to coaching?
We talked it through with him for years. He was receptive, and he was, at times felt very bad about it, but for some reason he couldn't control himself, maybe because of his past experiences in martial arts, where you come in with real ki. I'm not talking about yelling, but the energy just come in real strongly, and he was bringing that in to his jujitsu training, and he couldn't seem to break out of that habit.
It was too powerful.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the guy was strong as a bull,
Yeah.
and what made him very
Like
dangerous is that
you're
he was,
basically saying he was too powerful when you guys were training, where he should have had some black belt tendencies.
well, yeah, and I don't know if it's because of his black belt in his other martial art that he was that way, but whatever you want to do, you have to have a certain sense of control. If you want to just come in and rip somebody,
Yeah, that's
you should
not
have that
jiu-jitsu
ability.
training.
But at the same time, if you don't want to hurt somebody, you should have that ability as well.
Yeah. That's one thing I consistently expect from my students, particularly as they move up in rank, is control. Because that is so essential for their own safety. They may be in a situation where they really don't want to plant their attacker through the concrete. And the ability to control what you're doing also makes it a lot easier for you to effectively execute techniques. Because if you know what you're doing to the other person, and it's in an editorial that I've got for like November or December, somewhere, if you know physically what you are doing to the other person by feel, that gives you the ability to control what happens to that person. And like I think I've said a couple times recently, because I taught in a very tough school for a number of years, and the teachers would ask me, how can you put your hands on kids and never get into trouble? I said, I never left any marks. And that's probably what saved my butt. And that's one of the niceties, to me, that's one of the niceties of jujitsu. You have to be able, I think in any martial art, you have to be able to control what you're doing, because that's it. If anyone's been in a situation, you know that self-control is what ultimately will allow you to survive.
Yes.
And if you lose, I mean, I even told my students sometimes, if you go completely, it's amazing how many crazy people, I'm talking about crazy in terms of they lose control of themselves and they just become an animal. It's amazing how many crazy people win fights, but they have no idea what they did. On the other hand, if you can control what you're doing, you increase your odds of being successful. Doesn't always work, but it increases the odds. And that's all martial arts training can really do for you, is increase your odds of success.
What I'm hearing here is something that I refer to as dojo speed versus street speed. When we first learn a technique, we're concerned about developing accuracy. Accuracy over time, you're going to eventually develop some speed to go with that. And it does take time. And then from speed, you can get to the point where you toss in power. So I use the acronym ASP, accuracy, speed, and then power. And with dojo speed, you are demonstrating self-control, and you're doing the technique smoothly, but in a way that is going to be safe for your uke. That uke is going to turn around and do it to you the same speed you did it to them. And if they're capable. And that's not something you want to do. You're doing a hand throw, you need to be able to do a flip side fall and come out of it, or else you're going to have a broken wrist. And I worked with a 4th degree black belt in karate for years. He was one of our 7 that we trained together. This guy had no clue about the difference, and still doesn't, between dojo speed and street speed. And I know if I'm working with him, I'm going to have to be on point, because I'm dealing with street speed. And he has, on a couple of occasions, almost broken my wrist because I didn't get to the flip side fall soon enough. It can be scary, and it's something you can talk with them about, and sometimes it registers and you reach them, and sometimes it doesn't. I've never reached this guy.
Yeah, that's why a good uke is so important to being able to safely increase your speed. And like I said, one of the things we do with students is, and we usually do this maybe starting the 3rd or 4th week of their training, even as a white belt, is, and I've used the term before, it's deer in the headlights. Because many times a person who doesn't know how to defend themselves, or even if they do, it takes them anywhere from a half a second to 2 seconds to react to an attack. And so we'll put a white belt out there with maybe 3-4 weeks experience and have someone like swing at them or choke them or something like that. And we're not necessarily at that point looking for a technique. We're looking that they do something right away, whether it be try to block the hit or step back or step to the side or do something, because you're trying to get them to respond immediately to the attack. And that's the difference between dojo. In the dojo, we say, okay, you're going to hit the person with a fist, and you know what attack is coming. And you know that, okay, if I block it or deflect it or what have you, yada, yada, yada. But if we put them in the what we call a deer in the headlight situation, we don't tell the attacker how to attack. That's up to him. And it's a skill regardless of how many techniques you know or how well you can do them. If you go blank for half a second to 2 seconds, this time gap before, you see it and then you say, this is what I can do, you're dead meat on the street.
Well, that's what You know, I think with jujitsu, uh, a lot of people, a lot of gyms, I should say, or dojos or whatever you want to call your facility, they come with like a almost a enforcer for people who come in a little too bullyish or overpowering other UKs, you know?
Yeah. It
And go ahead.
it just takes one of the things I do, and I keep saying I've got to put this on in a video or still shots. If I get someone who's really strong and muscular, they come, which is fine, you know, no problem, you know, and they're trying to intimidate people. I kind of look at them as lack of a better phrase, a cousin Bubba. Okay? The guy who shakes your hand and is going to crush it to death. Okay,
Yeah.
to make an impression upon you.
Yeah.
And there is a technique, when I'll just try to explain it briefly. They can even use both of their hands. If you just let your hand collapse in theirs instead of trying to fight it, and then you take your tip of your middle finger and you put it on their radial nerve, which is about right there. And you just rest it there. You don't have to press down hard. They can squeeze until hell freezes over, and it's not going to do anything to you. It is such I call it a dumb, stupid technique. And
Is it with your index finger?
no, middle finger, because the longest
Oh,
finger,
middle finger. Okay.
whichever finger is the longest finger.
Okay.
And you
All
just rest it there with just a slight amount of pressure. The same technique works if someone has you in a full Nelson from behind. You can just take your middle finger, and as long as your head is straight up, you just take your middle finger and press it there. And for some reason, they're stuck.
Mm,
You know, I guess it's
'cause you're
because
holding your head,
it allows your muscle structure, whatnot, to push back against your finger and keep you straight. I don't understand how either of them actually work. I think the one with this here has to do with taking their ki or their energy and sending it back through them. I don't know if that's realistic or not, but it does make an impression on them.
And you're touching your own wrist or your opponent's wrist.
Your opponents, they're have you in this death handshake, and you're just taking your middle finger and resting it on the thumb side of their wrist. And just
Of their wrist.
Try it.
I will.
The trick is you can't do it. You can't do it this way. It has to be done with the tip of the finger. That's the hard part.
Try it right after this call with your family. They'll
Right after the what?
right after this call with some member of your family, so they understand quintessential jujitsu.
Right. I mean, they're both to an extent, such stupid techniques where they seem totally worthless, but somehow they work. And if you get someone who's cousin Bubba, it's an easy way to get them to street level, because they begin to realize all this strength is, you haven't done anything to them. You haven't even hurt them. You've just negated what they're able to do.
Well, that's why I was a white belt so long. I was 6'4", 200 and, about 30 pounds, and I have all muscle pretty much.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't have any fat really. And it took me a long time to realize, you might have power, but you need actual technique, and you have to be able to flow those techniques where it's with your partner and you're not hurting your partner and you're not trying to be the stronger, bigger guy,
Right. I mean, I've that's what I said before. Control is what's important. I mean, I've never said to a student who's been really strong, said, I've never said you can't use your muscle. But if you learn technique, that muscle can help.
Yes.
And that muscle is what will also allow you to control what you're doing. So it's, you know, and like someone else said, I've had 90-pound women whom I would not like to meet in a dark alley.
Yeah.
Because they have no, you know, they're, if the, and I think I've said it before, that, and this is another issue that I think girls tend to learn initially, maybe up into purple belt. Girls tend to learn faster than boys because girls realize they don't have the same muscle strength as boys, so they learn technique.
Yeah.
Eventually the guys catch up and they get the concept. But
Same with the littler guys. It seems like they learn technique a lot faster too.
yeah. So, you know, it's I don't know how we got this far off topic. But
Sorry.
I think what I think, pardon?
We're going to the gym.
Okay. I think what we're looking for in terms of a black belt is someone who would who is you know, respectful. They're humble. They have integrity. They respect the art. They respect themselves. They respect the dojo. You know, they're of good moral character. Okay, I think all these things factor into whether or not, I know, at least for me, and I think from what everyone else has said, what raises the potential of a person being a black belt. And maybe our responsibility as sensei is to either make sure that when students come in, we want to help develop all these skills or characters in them so that by the time they have the physical capability of being a black belt, they also have the moral capability or moral responsibility that goes along with it. And I think that's, you know, Darren has it in a nutshell. Ned has it in a nutshell. That's what we're looking for. And I think, I would hope that most martial arts function in that manner.
And I would throw in that,
Well
of
said.
course, where no one is perfect, and George, I, and others on the call have known of situations, say in the AJA, where we've had there's one incident in particular where some stuff was uncovered about someone's history that was questionable. This going back many years, and it's happened more than once in my helping out with the AJA. But if you've done something that's really problematic, just be open about it, be honest and humble about some mistake or some misjudgment you made in the past. And instead of this person sort of shut down and refused to answer any questions about his history, and so have the martial arts be flexible enough, I think, to accept people who make real mistakes or do things, and as long as the attitude coming in light of that mistake is humble and is on the road to improvement. But so far I've been stunned by, in the last several years, about how people will dig in. this person not even answering questions, or so I was amazed by that. But that humility, that need for humility and self criticism goes applies to people who are far more advanced than just the person you're considering for Udansha. And it goes with sometimes the unregulated quality of martial arts. you can have very high rank and yet not have anyone question you. Whereas in professions, you might have more skepticism about your claims. And so people push that to a great limit. And I think we should try to be humble no matter how high we get in rank.
Well said there, Sensei.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts on this? Okay. I think where are we at now? We're at 9:32. We're past Mellerin time. No. No. I don't mean to pick on you, Darren.
It's okay, Sensei. I'll deal with it.
No, I think it's a good idea.
Sensei, before we close, I have a follow-up from last week that I can help close this with, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Darren, I mentioned the newspaper article last week. I sent in all these pictures. I don't know if this is coming out clear or a little clear. But I want to let you know that I sent in all these pictures. Darren, you and Mark Tucker made the paper from last year's seminar. They chose the two best looking guys. I don't know why they did that.
It's amazing if in dealing with newspapers are a whole different story and trying to get publicity. I'm this judge, this city. I mean, you can get free ad if you work for a city or park or whatever. You can get free publicity on the radio. You can get free publicity in newspapers. It's amazing what's out there, but it takes a lot of time and persistence to get it. But anyway, that's going to be another topic way down the road. But so anyway, we're going to stop now, and
sorry I came in late this time.
that's in our topics next time will be you don't start to learn your martial art until you have to teach it. Can all black belts teach, or do they want to teach? And that's a interesting topic. Both are good topics. So you've got 2 weeks to think about it. So we'll see you back here on the 19th, 19th of October.
George, do you want to stay on this call and discuss that other issue?
Yeah, we can do that if you'd like. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sensei, and everyone. Thank you so much for helping me out in this. Much
Okay.
appreciated.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Thanks.
Cool.
Have a good weekend, everybody. Sorry I was a little late.
If you were in
Appreciate you
Helene's
guys.
path, if you were in Helene's path, I wish you, good luck and hope you're okay, and hope friends and relatives of yours are okay as well. And I think they need to start watching out for Hurricane Kirk. I think that's the next one. But
Jeez.
okay, so this conversation, today's Zoom meeting is over, and I'm continuing on with Tom because we have another issue or two to discuss. So take care, don't do anything dangerous, and that's about it. So
Everyone.
Bye.
bye-bye.
But
Okay, we're waiting for
The blue-eyed Buddhist.
the blue-eyed Buddhist to say goodbye.
well, you guys have a good weekend.
What's
Okay.
your,
Seeing you.
Thank you for being with us.
can we get
Yes, I'll try to be in. You guys have the California time and I'm by Chicago, so it's always
what's your real name?
my real name is Dustin.
Dustin.
Justin. Okay, very good. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Yep,
Okay, we'll
you have a good day.
see you in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Okay.
You have a good one.
See ya.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Tom, did you want to record this or not record this?
I don't think we need to record it.
Okay, let me pause recording, stop recording.